The best season of the year is finally here. In celebration of autumn, we are painting some watercolor gourds and pumpkins. Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Welcome back, friends. My name is Shayda, and today I'm going to show you how to paint pumpkins, but first we need to draw them. So let's start there. I'm using a mechanical pencil, and because I want to draw a bunch of pumpkins, I find it easy to make a grid first. That just helps me with the layout. We're going to place a pumpkin right in the middle. So first I do the shape. This one's kind of an oval. And then we break that oval into little pieces. So you can see kind of how breaking it up and then adding a stem right on the top gives me the look of that little pumpkin or gourd. Let's do another one together. Draw the shape first. This guy's a little taller. And then we break that shape, that circle or oval, into a bunch of sections. For this third one, I'm making more of a gourd, so the shape is kind of larger on the bottom, but I'm still following the same formula. This guy's gonna be a classic pumpkin, so start with an oval and then I broke it into 3 sections. I'm also gonna place a little tiny baby pumpkin right beside him, but I think you're kind of seeing the formula come together. And then for this last one, I'm doing one of those funny gourds that's really tiny on top and large on the bottom. Okay, let's mix up our paints. I know that I definitely want to do one of those like blue-gray pumpkins, so that's the first color I'm mixing up. I've started with a French gray, and then I'm going to mix in this phthalo green. This is a green that's very dark and permanent and cool, so I love that. Mixing it with gray gives me a really pretty muted autumn color, and then you see me mixing in a bit of like a cobalt blue as well. I'm also going to mix white in there, so I get the brush really wet, and then I scrub at the cake of paint and bring over the color to the palette. I can't tell you exactly how to mix your paints. You just want to play around with them and have some scrap paper handy so you can test them. For the next pumpkin, I want to do one of those pink Cinderella pumpkins. So I've started with a lot of peach and a little hint of pink and lots of water, of course. Then we're going to mix a little bit of white in there as well. I like mixing the white in, it kind of mutes it. For the next one, I do need an orange pumpkin here, I think. So I'm mixing peach with a little bit of yellow orange, and again, lots of water, and then lots of white as well. So in between grabbing every color, I wash my brush, and then with a wet brush, I pick up the pigment. Now here's what I mean. You want to test your colors. So that orange, it just looked a little too bright to me, so I mixed a hint of brown in, and then I was happy with it. And same thing here, that blue looks too bright, so I mix in more French gray, and that's gonna give me that muted, weird, greeny pumpkin color. Every week, I give extra content on my Patreon site. It's a great way to support the channel and get goodies like this coloring page for autumn. Head over to Patreon after today's video and check it out. Want to win all the watercolor supplies you see me using here, including my brush and Strathmore sketchbook? Well, you can. Simply like this video, subscribe to my channel, turn your notifications on, and comment below letting me know your favorite thing about autumn. Before we paint, I want to get rid of as much pencil as I can, so I tend to erase and then just lightly sketch in my drawing. I know that's weird, it's like erase it, then redraw it, but I want the drawing to be super light. If you paint over pencil, you can't erase it. And then here's what we're going to do. We're going to paint each section of that pumpkin one at a time, kind of. So you can see I started with the middle section, I left a little bit of a highlight, I'm adding a little bit of darker paint or extra pigment at the bottom. And then I just keep going one section at a time. This one kind of has 5 little sections, 3 in the front and then 2 peeking out from behind. And just make sure to leave little highlights, leave bits of negative space. I sometimes leave a little bit of a page showing through between the sections. I add a little extra pigment at the top and the bottom, and that just really helps with the look, or the 3-dimensional look of the pumpkin. And then I picked up just a little bit of brown and added added some lines to the stem. Again, leave a bit of negative space there. Next one is my pink pumpkin, my Cinderella pumpkin. I just love that color. You know, these gourds have such specific colors. There's a certain pink that is the color of a pink pumpkin, and that certain sort of dark sea foam that is the color of the gray ghost pumpkin. So make sure to mix up your paints and test them on paper ahead of time. Then when you're painting your pumpkins, just go one section at a time and leave light spots and then add dark spots. And most of my dark spots are at the bottom and top of the pumpkin to give it a nice rounded look. But you don't have to overthink it. Just leave a few highlights wherever you want to leave a highlight and add a little extra pigment wherever you want to. You can see with this peachy orange, I'm doing the same thing. I painted it one section at a time, and then using the tip of my brush with a little extra paint, I just add that extra dark orange kind of around the stem and then at the bottom. And for the stem, I like to add the brown while the other paint or other color is still a little bit wet so that it blends slightly but not too much. Next up, I want to paint that big funny gourd, but I need to mix up a color for it first. So I am using the phthalo green, and then I am mixing in purple. I have this really dark purple, and that's it. Those are the only two colors I'm going to use to create an incredibly dark, cool, rich shade of green that's going to be perfect for those gourds that are so dark they're almost black green. You can see I'm testing it on the page. It looks great. It's super dark, and I am starting at the top of my gourd and just filling in. I've got a nice pencil outline that's super light, so I kind of use the tip of the brush to do the edges, and then I use the belly of the brush to you know, put out larger areas of color. I thought for a moment that I was going to leave a highlight there, so that's what you see me doing. And then to paint in the bottom of the gourd, we're just using water and kind of blending out that dark color so that the gourd gets lighter at the bottom. Decided against the highlight. It's gonna look too weird with such a dark color to leave a highlight, but we'll talk about the remedy in a moment. And again, just using water to kind of blend out that color so my gourd has a nice light colored butt. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm gonna do a little wet into wet and just add some kind of stripes or lines on the bottom, and they kind of bleed out a little, which looks nice and natural. And then I'm using kind of a gray brown to just put a little nubbin on his top there. And then here's how we're adding a highlight. We're going to do a bloom. A bloom just means adding a bit of water to the paint while it's still wet. And you can see the water creates a nice highlight. It's a much more natural looking highlight, especially when we're dealing with a dark color. And you can continue to pick up pigment using a dry brush. That's the magic of a bloom. I want to paint at least one pumpkin or gourd that is white because I know a lot of us love a good white pumpkin. So to begin, I've brought a lot of white paint over to the palette, mixed it with water. Then I'm taking just a little bit of brown. You'll see me just pick up a hint of brown on the tip of my brush. I'm gonna clean my brush so I don't have extra brown in there. And then I mix those colors together. So lots of white with just a hint of brown gives us this nice creamy beige, which looks white on the page and really gives the color of a white pumpkin. Now I'm doing a white gourd, and again, painting it one section at a time, adding a little extra pigment at the top and the bottom to give me that rounded look. Then I'm gonna come over here and we're going to grab a little brown. Now you wanna give the white a chance to dry slightly when there's no longer a sheen on it. That's when you want to start adding brown. And look at the pumpkin that's on the left of the screen. That's kind of what I'm painting, except instead of dark green, I'm doing dark brown. I have enough green on this piece. And I'm just kind of making these messy stripes or lines, a few dots, and the wet into wet by painting wet brown on top of the wet white paint. It gives me a really natural, organic look because the paint just bleeds out slightly, and that's a really helpful thing when you're painting items from nature. My final pumpkin is going to be burgundy, so I am mixing this magenta with a dark brown. It's important to remember you can paint your pumpkins any color you like. You know, you can follow along with mine, but you may go for a warmer color palette. I am going for kind of a cool color palette, even though it's autumn. This pumpkin, I'm doing something a little different. I started with pink and painted the tops of all 4 sections. Then I grabbed that really dark magenta brown color that we just mixed up, and I'm going to paint all 4 bottom sections. And that just gives me a really nice blend of color. I'm also adding a bit of the darker pink at the top. So again, we've been talking about maybe adding a bit of darker pigment at the top and bottom of the pumpkin to give us that nice rounded look. This is just a more extreme way of doing that, where we started with actually an even lighter color, a different color, and then it all kind of blended together and came together, and we get a really beautiful highlight there. And I'm kind of playing around with it and just working out the shape of the pumpkin. I'm going to make a nice rich brown for the stem by blending brown with pink and purple so that it stays in that kind of pinky warm family. And I am going to paint the stem while the pumpkin is still wet so that it blends slightly. And that's pretty much it. I am gonna let those dry, although most of them already have dried. And now, if you're thinking they look a little washed out, they tend to. Yes, watercolor kind of dries and looks a little bit lighter than maybe it did when it was wet. And that's why we need to use a wet on dry technique to layer more paint and give us the oomph that we want. So don't worry if your painting looks washed out. All I'm doing now is just adding some lowlights. I grabbed a little peach and pink, some of that minty gray color, and I am just adding some shading. When you're adding shading or lowlights, don't be afraid to get a little weird with it. Put a splotch of dark pink or orange on there and just let it be. Next, I'd like to put a little bit of pattern on that really dark gourd, so I'm actually adding a bit of black to the green, and then you'll see I've taken just the tip of my brush and we're going to add some dotting to these stripes. And that's just a fun, easy way to add a little bit of pattern here and make him even more gourd-like, but super simple to do. And really at this point we're almost done. You've added some lowlights, maybe a little bit of pattern. We could get a darker brown or gray on the brush and maybe just add a few lines to each stem. You know, these little details are what make your painting pop, but it's also optional. You don't want to go crazy with it. You can see I'm just adding a few little extras here and there. Probably going to put a few lowlights on this burgundy pumpkin, and then that is going to be about it. If you are interested in any of these supplies that you saw me using in today's video, head over to my blog. All the supply links are there so you can shop these paints and brushes and paper and all of it. Patrons, remember to go over to Patreon to grab your coloring page, nice autumn coloring page. And I'd like to thank Squarespace again for sponsoring our video today. If you're thinking about turning your artistic hobby or passion into a career, having a website is the first step, and Squarespace makes that super simple. You can build a portfolio and gallery of your work. They have easy importing. You can import images from your social media. They have automatic image scaling, so you don't have to worry about cropping and all of that. And they have 24/7 email support if you do run into any trouble. If you're interested in selling your artwork, it's also very easy to build a store with Squarespace. And I think there's so many of us that really want to create a career from our art. So think about building your own website. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Shayda Campbell to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.